This is Donald Parham of the LA Chargers, and you're listening to Chargers Unleashed, part of the LA Football Network. Stay jiggy.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dale Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, AG1, Aura, Mint Mobile, and Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning in to the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein.
Jake Hefner.
We're still here. We still got 4 games left.
Hello.
This could set the record for the shortest game preview episode that we have ever done on Chargers Unleashed, given the circumstances that Justin Herbert has officially been put on IR. He will not return for the 2023 season, which means Easton Stick takes the reins into Thursday Night Football and what looks to be a barn burner with a whole bunch of injuries for both teams. I'm sure that Al Michaels is loving the fact that he gets to call this game.
Oh, yeah.
But for the sake of argument, this will be a so-called preview, if you will, of Chargers versus the Raiders on Thursday Night Football.
It will be a preview of that, sort of, and kind of what the team, should be looking at this game and games moving forward, and kind of the ramifications of that. But you mentioned it, man. Both franchises, both teams are down bad right now. I saw they're looking at Aiden O'Connell or Jimmy Garoppolo, or maybe none of the two, with someone else coming in at quarterback. The Chargers both have the same 5-8 record. It's just been all bad for many different reasons for both franchises. And now it's going to be on Thursday Night Football, primetime for everyone to see. And you mentioned it. Easton Stick is in there, which I'm excited for him and his opportunity. I don't know what that will look like, especially when you got Max Crosby copy on the other side.
He might not even be playing either.
He
may not even be playing. He has not, just for context, he hasn't practiced all week either. So who knows what we're going to get from both squads on Thursday.
So I think to set the stage for this episode, Jake, I think it's important,
to
a lot of people
set our watches.
Yeah, well, that too. A lot of people are coming around to draft season mode, and it being a lost season, and why would you win? It doesn't do yourself any good. They're kind of in that mind space. To set the record straight, NFL franchises don't work that way. That's not how they operate. And so the way fans think in that regard is different than NFL players or coaches or executives. You don't just try to lose, as much as that could possibly help you in the future. That said, I think that there are levers that teams can pull that may be able to help them better themselves for the future, both in current roster and future capital, which I think that's the bigger picture that we're going to discuss today, because nobody cares about matchups in this game, realistically. People listening, watching, you tell me, do you care? Nobody cares about the head coaching duel between these two guys. Nobody cares. It's just a different conversation right now. To me, the lens has turned to who on this team will prove or improve their value heading into 2024. And that's young guys, that's veteran guys, but more so young guys, in my opinion. And that, I think, is what I am kind of looking at and excited to watch this game is the guys that need to develop and will be on this roster next year regardless, or guys that we want to be on this roster next year who may be free agents. We don't know. There's a whole bunch of questions about this roster. And so, for me anyways, it brings me peace to kind of look at facts and the things that we know are true. And so while I look at this game, I'm looking at Easton Stick Like, this guy has had a long time coming to be able to play, start, all that kind of stuff. Like, this is his team for the next month. We'll see. Excited for him and his opportunity. Like, can he be a long-term backup solution? I don't know. Isaiah Spiller, we've talked about it for months at this point. The Chargers offense can't look any worse, at least the running game, which we'll get into why that has been the case. But in short, players can shine and can get peppered with opportunities and go through the trial by fire. That's what I'm looking for this game. Be honest, Jake. If you weren't going to watch the game, which I'm not, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you probably were going to watch it. But if you weren't, what would be the reasons that someone could tell you why you should be interested in this game?
Yeah, you kind of brought it up there. It's just, and we talked about this in our last episode in terms of, what's left of the season. It's basically now, outside of the expectations that we have for what we expect to happen at the end of the season with coach, GM. Now you look at the roster in terms of guys that are either still under contract, contracts are coming up, and to say, okay, well, who is it that really wants to play for this team in 2024? Who's going to make a case for that? So it's weird in a circumstance, especially now with Justin Herbert out, with playoff contentions gone, that you look at these last 4 games almost as like preseason games in the same type of work. Like who wants to step up in that circumstance to say, this is going to be a guy that's going to stick on this roster in 2024. That's really the only reason that if anybody has any interest in watching this or any game beyond this, regardless of whether the Chargers win or lose, that would be the only reason.
It's interesting. You said like the guys who want to step up. In my opinion, and I have felt this way for the better part of this year, like especially with Quentin Johnston as an example. Like once Mike went down, and then especially once Josh Palmer went down, which by the way, he's set to return. So I think that's a healthy, fresh breath of fresh air. Will it matter? Should it matter? No. Different story.
Talk about the bad timing awards rearing their ugly head at the best possible moment.
Oh my gosh, that notification you got that said like Justin Herbert IR, but Josh Palmer returns. You're like,
yeah, it's
but the
one of those times where
the
social media team just totally took the wind out of your sails. It's like, man, that just went from like a bad tweet to worse by announcing.
Yeah, it's the thing that I look at, I mentioned it with Quentin Johnston, is like it's not necessarily even like who wants to be a bigger part of this team, or who wants to be a part of the roster in 2024, but like it's forcing that decision, I think, is what I want to see this coaching staff and front office do with these players. Like force the players, the staff, fans to go through it. Like we've seen what has happened so far. Again, the team's 5-8. We've seen what's happened when the team has shielded the starters or shielded the fans from guys like Isaiah Spiller or Quentin Johnston or JT Woods or Deion Henley or a bunch of other guys because they're not ready. We've heard that all season. Well, the team's 5-8. So the guys who were ready didn't work out either for a multitude of reasons. But now that essentially, again, they're not mathematically eliminated, but with Easton Stick at the helm and you going 4 straight wins, it's a far fetch.
Call it.
Force the hand. Force Quentin Johnston to be that guy. And if he drops 4 or 5 in a row, then he drops 4 or 5 in a row. Force Isaiah Spiller to work through the rust or the young running back archetype that he's kind of gotten plagued with. If he's not ready, okay, put him out there. The best way he gets ready is to put him in the game. Look at the secondary. Dean Leonard was put into a position where we had to start. If he's healthy, put him out there. Is he a solution for you long term? Or should he just be a depth piece? Right now, Jake, your starting corners next year are Asante Samuel Jr., Dean Leonard, and Jazir Taylor. Deion Henley, they say he's not ready. I don't care. I think his athleticism will probably take over for some of the areas that he's not ready. But let's see it. Darius Davis, we've been clamoring for him to be an offensive weapon other than 2 jet sweeps a game. Force the hand. Have him run some go routes. Throw the ball up. Give him some slants. See what you can do. Like, this is like assessment time. And if you're looking at this as preseason, get those guys out there early, often. And if it doesn't work, that's what you were expecting.
Exactly.
But let them go through it. Like, it seems like they're protecting themselves from themselves, and that clearly didn't lead to success.
The hard part to evaluate in all this, Dan, is obviously depending on, you could go through this a multitude of different ways, as you were talking about, with just some of the young guys on this team, ones that are still going to be under contract next year. And reality is just how they perform today or over these next 4 weeks, regardless if it's good or bad, it's not even the most indicative picture of how they may perform in the future under different leadership. That's the kicker. So it's really
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, in terms of how they've either been implemented in this defense or offensive players, when we're talking about Darius Davis, Quentin Johnston, and their usage overall. I mean, again, I understand where everybody's mindset is, and I'm totally with you. And believe me, Dan and I have already set this up in terms of the conversations that we are going to have this week as it relates to changes that are coming from the top down and what needs to be done from the top down. We're still going to be going through our 2024 roster construction position by position, and it's not going to be pretty when the 2024 offseason starts. There are a lot of tough decisions to make, but that's kind of the tough part about it is, Dan, is that one player that may work for this system may not work for another. So I get what you're saying in terms of like, let's see.
You know what's funny about that? What's funny about that, Jake, is while true, you could argue the players that they currently haven't been working for this organization, so it probably will work for the next one.
It's really bizarre. It's really bizarre. That is the mess that the 2023 Chargers have become this year. Because, as we talked about, you don't have anything to hang your hat on in terms of consistency. Good games as a full team to go back on and say, what did we do right here that we can implement in the future? And now, especially with Justin Herbert out, you really can't do much. So in this type of a game where you may not have Keenan Allen, from things that Dan and I have heard, you may not even have Donald Parham for this game. There could be a lot of guys out. Dean Leonard, again, doesn't look like he's going to be playing, has not practiced all week. That's not good for a Thursday night type game. So it'll be Michael Davis most likely starting in his position. It's just, what are you going to get in this game? And if it's me, and with these changes that Brandon Staley has essentially tried to implement over these last couple of weeks, screw it. I'm going to full overhaul. I'm going a full overhaul at this point in time. If that's how you want to play it, and what you know from what you have right now being 5-8, the crappy part about this is that this Chargers team was not a good football team with Justin Herbert at the helm. So it's probably not going to be any better with Easton Stick at the helm. So try to do something just to evaluate individual talent.
So let me ask you something here. And I'm asking this to you and to watchers, listeners, like for younger players, or hell, even for veterans, but for specifically younger players, do you think that losses or wins impact them more?
Wins impact them more. And I hate saying that, and I know what that sounds like. But as we have said, the 2024 season financially for the Chargers is going to be hell. For anybody that is going to say, why don't the Chargers sign somebody in free agency come next year? There's going to be a good reason why. The reason why is they're not going to have much money to do so. The best thing that the Chargers are going to be able to do is sign depth pieces that are low-level contracts at best.
Well, to be specific, the reason it will be hell, I think the hell part of it is because of the guys you're going to have to let go. period.
Correct. Hard decisions on top of everything. We have talked about the big contracts that are affecting your salary cap in Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Khalil Mack, and Joey Bosa. And I don't think that anybody looking at this rationally can say that all four of those guys are going to be back on this roster next
0% chance. 0% chance. No way. And that's me being an optimist. But to back to the wins and losses.
Yes, in terms of how does it what benefits them more? Because your salary cap is going to be so screwed next year, you have to figure out a way to get performances on low-level contracts. So that increases the value of how much next year's draft means to you.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking is I agree with you. I think rookies experiencing wins, I think, is more important. I think affects them positively more than rookies going through losses. And I know there's an argument of tank season and you want to get the best overall draft pick and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's that argument to be had. But I will also argue this season has been tough and they have lost some gut wrenching, skip the record for every last 10 years, whatever. But like, I would love to see Quentin Johnston get a game-winning reception. Like, have him go take the house game-winning, even if it means you go down 3 slots in the draft. Like, if I had to choose between those two scenarios, having a confident Quentin Johnston with some shine going into year 2, or 3 spots different in the draft, like, I'm taking the money that's already in my pocket. But if you extrapolate that to other guys, now you could argue, like, okay, well, what if Quentin Johnston got that house call and then the defense gave up a touchdown with 10 seconds left? Okay, sure, whatever. But like, I think that's where the argument is. People. I saw stuff today about people saying, like, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but like, if the Chargers, if you're rooting for a Chargers victory, you're just content with mediocrity and losing. And like, I kind of understand that, but also, like, you're telling me you're okay with losing. You're telling the people that want to win are okay with losing, but you want to lose in order to win. Like, do you not see the irony in this? Now, you could talk about short-term versus long-term, like a different conversation, but that's not the mindset of these players in any NFL team. It's just not. So personally, like, do I think that this team's going to end up 9-8? No, I don't. And I think that going to that like scenario, like, that would kind of suck from a draft position. But like, win on Raiders a week and you lose the next 3, for example, like, I'm totally cool with that. From a draft season, tank season, but player progression, momentum going into the next season, like, that's okay. And so, like, I think the micros versus the macros sometimes get confused here. The other part that I probably should bring up for this discussion, specifically for this game and games moving forward, is, you and I have talked about, like, the roster construction and, like, how many holes are going to be on this roster come basically January 9th, if you will. I want to get your take on this because I thought about this a little bit last night and today, and I know draft talk is like your vibe.
Oh, yes.
I started thinking about it, and there's a lot of positions that are going to have holes next year. And there's a lot of needs that this team has. And it's really easy to kind of get, like, caught up on just, like, the sheer volume of all of those things. Like, oh, we need a corner, running back, wide receiver, tight end. We need offensive line, defensive line. We need linebacker, like, all of those things, right? But it is interesting to me. Like, some of the things that I believe have plagued this team the most this year are things, again, for the most part, that come with relatively low draft capital needs. So, like, for example, I don't necessarily think a bona fide offensive weapon tight end has been the thing that this offense has needed or has been crippling this team. Like, I think some semblance of a blocking tight end for sure has been a massive problem. I think blocking running backs obviously have been massive problems, and run blocking in general have been massive problems. So interior offensive line, running back, tight end, all three of those things you could argue could/should be focused on later in the draft. And you can find quality talent. You don't go draft for a blocking tight end need at tight end 1 in round 1. You just don't. So while there are a ton of holes, there's a path if you focus your vision on, like, okay, what are the most important things this team needs to solve for, and where are those things relative to draft position? And so, like, I'm thinking about that when I'm going into this game tomorrow. Is like, all right, like, if we have serious issues at run blocking, for example, like, all right, or running game, for example, you can find a day 2, day 3 running back. Into your offensive line, you can find day 2 starters all day long, every single year. Blocking tight end, you could find in day 3. But on the back end, you can't find a bona fide corner day 3. And you've seen what this DB room has looked like this year. If you're wanting to go find a bona fide wide receiver, the Marvin Harrisons of the world, the Malik Neighbors of the world, you've heard those names. Those don't come around day 2, day 3. Those type. You can get quality receivers, but like those bona fide alphas like that typically don't come. So like that's where I'm kind of thinking as I go through, like, watching different positions play out. What does that mean for draft strategy?
It means that the Chargers can go virtually anywhere they want. If their remaining 4 games put them around, let's just say, pick 6 for sake of argument, that's where they finish.
Let's say 5 to 10. Let's say 6 to 10.
Any position besides quarterback, the Chargers could essentially go for. Now, there's ones that you could automatically eliminate. Obviously, running back, this is not the Bijan Robinson, Jamari Gibbs type year. There's no first-round grade running back in this class. So obviously that will pass in talking about that 6 to 10 range. Offensive tackle, which I know that people have talked about, obviously with everything with Joe Alt. Tackle.
I don't know.
First of all, you're already in cap hell, and I don't see them replacing Trey Pipkins and then putting themselves in more dead cap space. So I don't see that being the issue. If they go offensive lineman anywhere, obviously it'll be to possibly replace Corey Linsley. So you could take that one out at being that early. If it's me, Dan, there's 3 positions that I look at, and then it's the trading back possibility, which of course I have heavily favored for years. And I'm hoping between now and my death that I will see this team actually do it and do it correctly. Brock Bowers, regardless of what you want to say for what he is, what this team needs, he's got generational tight end talent. And the drop off between what he does compared to the other tight ends in this class, there's a big difference. This is not like the tight end class of last year where you could put a bunch together and say, oh, this tight end class is deep. You can get a guy that's like that in virtually every round. Brock Bowers is that dude. Cornerback, we could definitely go there. As we talked about in our previous 2024 roster construction, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Nate Wiggins. There's a lot of top-end corner talent that the Chargers could target in this particular draft.
Which they haven't done in a decade, by the way.
Which they have not done in a while. Now, another one, we know that Austin Johnson, I don't think Austin Johnson is going to be returning to the Chargers next year. His contract is up. I don't foresee that to be one that the Chargers bring back. Again, I'm not trying to break any news here or even be able to predict on who the hell the
My gut
GM
says
of this
he
team
and
is.
SJD are both gone.
So you could look to the trenches to try to rebuild there. And there's a couple guys as it relates to either the edge or the defensive linemen that have a top 10 grade on them that you could do. Or, my favorite, trade down. If the Chargers find themselves, say, Dan, at number 6 with as many quarterbacks that are projected to go in the top 10, this would be the prime time to do it. And it's because of the fact that you have so many of those holes to fill that if you can acquire an additional pick here, there, and ultimately select the right guys and doing it, it's not just trading down is just half the picture, because once you do it, you eventually have to utilize those other picks that you have and utilize them right. We've seen what Tom Telesco has done when he's had 2 third-round picks. He took Joshua Palmer and he took Trey McKitty. So under this GM,
the problem I have with like this is the trading back thing, and I'm not trying to put a pin in your excitement balloon here, but if Tom Telesco's back next year, it's not happening. Period.
Probably not. And first of all,
which is a whole different conversation.
That's a whole different conversation. And I'm just referring to him as the GM from this point forward. That name will not come out of my mouth any longer. That's a whole different conversation in itself. And you're probably right, Dan, if that outcome ends up coming true. And that's very unfortunate.
Literally, Jake, you would appreciate this or despise this. I was looking at draft trade formulas and stuff. And I was going all right, let's see what the Chargers draft capital look like. And it's just all chalk across the board, 1 through 7.
Yes.
Same selection. I'm
basic.
So look,
and you just realize, and all of a sudden you realize, why am I wasting my time?
Yes. That may or may not have come out of my mouth last night. So when I think about it, right? I think, okay, looking at this team's construction and what's necessary going into this game against the Raiders and moving forward, I kind of look at it through the lens of okay, which positions are the ones that need to get fixed from a personnel perspective, and which positions or areas of weakness need to get fixed by coaching / scheme. So, for example, people say, "Oh, we should go offensive line around 1." You can never go. You're never wrong by going offensive line around 1. I'm not saying don't do it, but in my opinion, the issues with their offensive line, pass protection specifically, one, way more issue with running backs and tight ends that aren't blocking correctly. But also, schematically, whether that's Justin, lack of Corey, or Kellen Moore not teaching these guys, that's schematically not taught to them. When you know an overload blitz is coming, you should be able to prepare for that schematically, both as a line, tight end, running backs, and receivers, and quarterback. There's ways to scheme against that, and they simply don't.
No.
So, that, I don't think an offensive tackle fixes it. When you got 9 guys coming, or exaggeration, of course, but when you got a ton of guys coming. So, that's how I'm looking at this.
Which I get. And if you're putting it into perspective to say okay, things to watch for at these positions to evaluate the talent that's currently there. Tight end, obviously, is that, because Gerald Everett will not be under contract next year. Donald Parham and Stone Smart will be gone the year after. And you have not properly invested in this tight end room, in my opinion, the way that you probably should have. How about linebacker? Kenneth Murray's contract is up after this season. You don't know whether you're going to move forward with Eric Kendricks. You need to see what you have with Deion Henley for why you drafted him in the 3rd round to be other than just a special teamer. We know the situation.
Nick Neiman and Deion Henley.
Right. You know the situation that you have currently at running back. Austin Eckler will not be returning. Joshua Kelly's contract is up. So feed, as you said, Isaiah Spiller. See what you have with the depth of this wide receiver group. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Jalen Guyton could conceivably not be with this team next year. Just think about that for a second.
Your starting wide receivers would be Quentin Johnson, Darius Davis,
Joshua Palmer. Woof. Scary woof.
So that's what we're looking for.
You're just thinking it from a standpoint of say, okay, we need to draft there, and there. That's why I would encourage you to tune in. Otherwise,
but
if you've got better plans, by all means, take them.
You can watch the replay for sure.
Take them.
Yes, and again, I'm looking at this of positions versus scheme. which are the issues that are personnel? Which are the issues that can be fixed with scheme? That's my eye. So when I go into this game, that's where my focus is. Who cares about bold predictions? I'd love to see Easton Stick throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Quentin Johnson having a $150. You know, Deion Henley scoop and score. It'd be sick. But like, none of it. I don't know.
None of
Do you want to give one? Do you want to give a bold one?
For what?
Okay, give me just for shits and giggles. Give me one bold prediction.
Quentin Johnson goes for over 100 yards and a touchdown, and the Chargers loss 28-7. There you go. Like I could care less.
Oh, that's a way to end this show. For Jake Hefner, Dan Wolkenstein, LAFB Chargers Unleashed. Big pivotal matchup coming up tomorrow. Chargers versus Raiders. Which
Huge.
team will get to 9 losses? We'll find out by about 8:30 Pacific time on Thursday. The sun will shine bright once again, but between now and early January,
it's basically, Morador. This is basically what we have for the next month.
And we are just taking that march every single day. Again, Jake Hefner, Dan Wolkenstein, thanks guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time on Chargers.